Hi, my name is Ashley Drum, and this project explores how UDL-aligned multimedia lesson design can support learner comprehension in online learning environments. Specifically, I wanted to examine whether incorporating multimedia and UDL principles could improve student understanding compared to traditional text-based instruction. In online and blended K-12 learning environments, students often engage independently with instructional media. This means the lesson itself carries most of the instructional load. At the same time, learners bring significant variability in reading ability, attention, and background knowledge. Because of this, the way instructional media is designed plays a critical role in whether students are able to successfully understand the content. However, much instructional media is still designed for what we might think of as an average learner. These lessons often rely heavily on text, provide limited supports, and do not account for differences in how students process information. As a result, learners can experience cognitive overload or struggle to access the content. This can unintentionally exclude some students from fully understanding the material. To address this, I use the Universal Design for Learning framework. UDL emphasizes designing for learner variability from the start rather than retrofitting supports later. It encourages providing multiple means of representation, engagement, and action and expression. In this study, UDL guided the design of a multimedia lesson intended to improve both access and comprehension. This led to my research question. To what extent do UDL-aligned multimedia lessons improve learner comprehension compared to text-based instruction in online and blended K-12 environments? To investigate this, I used a two-group comparison design. Lesson A was primarily text-based with limited supports and minimal visuals. Lesson B contained the same content and assessment, but included multiple forms of media, embedded supports, and richer visuals aligned to UDL principles. 10 participants were randomly assigned to one of the two lessons. This allowed instructional design to serve as the key variable. Participants were randomly assigned to either Lesson A or Lesson B. First, they completed their assigned online lesson independently. Throughout the lesson, they responded to embedded checks for understanding. After completing the lesson, they took a post-lesson comprehension assessment. They then completed an engagement survey, followed by a short reflection describing what helped their learning. This consistent process ensured that the only difference between groups was the lesson design. I collected 3 types of data. First, embedded questions provided ongoing checks for understanding during the lesson. Second, a post-lesson assessment measured comprehension. And third, student experience data was gathered through an engagement survey and reflection. This allowed me to capture both learning outcomes and how students experienced the lesson. For analysis, I used both quantitative and qualitative approaches. I calculated descriptive statistics, including mean comprehension scores and response patterns. I then compared results between Lesson A and Lesson B. In addition, I conducted thematic coding of student reflections, focusing on engagement, cognitive load, and instructional clarity. These data sources were triangulated to better understand differences in both outcomes and experiences. For comprehension, Lesson A scores ranged from 57 to 100%, while Lesson B scores ranged from 71 to 86%. Lesson B showed higher average comprehension and more consistent performance across learners. Importantly, Lesson B eliminated the lowest scores seen in Lesson A. This suggests that UDL-aligned supports may be particularly beneficial for struggling learners. Even though the difference in averages may appear modest, in a real classroom context, This level of improvement can meaningfully impact student success. Student experience data further supported these findings. Participants in Lesson B reported higher engagement and described the lesson as easier to process and understand. Many specifically mentioned that visuals, videos, and timelines help make the content more meaningful. In contrast, students in Lesson A often describe the lesson as mostly reading. These findings align with cognitive load theory, suggesting that multimedia and scaffolding can reduce cognitive burden and support comprehension. Overall, the key finding is that UDL-aligned multimedia lesson resulted in both higher comprehension and improved student experience. This suggests that UDL-aligned design does not just improve engagement, it actively supports comprehension by reducing cognitive load and increasing accessibility. These findings have important implications for practice. Even small instructional design changes can lead to measurable improvements in learning. UDL supports can help struggling learners without lowering rigor. And these strategies are scalable to both online and blended environments. Ultimately, this highlights that instructional design is a key lever for promoting equity in learning. The main implication of this study is that instructional design matters. It is not just the content itself, but how that content is designed and delivered that impacts student learning. Incorporating multimedia and UDL-aligned supports can improve comprehension outcomes and make learning more accessible to a wider range of students. These are the references that inform my study, including research on UDL, cognitive load, and multimedia learning. Thank you for your time.